you. That's good, because I was like, oh, I didn't make this font big enough, but then lights came. Okay. Sorry. Nope. Doesn't. We're good. I'm just not going to touch it. Okay. Lack of sperm exposure. This is the actual medical diagnosis that was written in my charts when I decided at age 38 to have a child on my own through artificial insemination. Lack of sperm exposure, meaning I wasn't getting laid. It was an accurate, if clinical and somewhat humiliating, description of my plight. I just heard somebody go, oh, sorry. The decision to become a single mother was not an easy one, but after years of dating, including a short early marriage that ended without any offspring, I knew it was the right decision for me. I did my research. I read the websites. I wrote pro and con lists on the back of every envelope in my kitchen. The main thing that bothered me, pretty much the only thing that bothered me, was the idea of my child not knowing who his father was. I really wanted to find some way for my child to know his biological father. And an earlier plan to have a good friend donate sperm had fallen through. So I sought out a sperm bank that had what is called an identity release program. Under this arrangement, the sperm donor agrees up front that when the child turns 18, he or she can receive the donor's name and contact information. Nowadays, this open arrangement is much more common, but 15 years ago, it was a brand new, controversial idea, and not very many sperm banks were open to it. Luckily, I was living in California at the time, and I found a sperm bank in Berkeley that had pioneered the identity release concept. It was a low-tech, not-for-profit operation headquartered in an old Victorian house with a sort of 60s free love, free clinic vibe. It was run by friendly Birkenstock-wearing lesbians who showed me binders full of donor profiles as we sat in their patchouli-scented offices surrounded by way too many ferns. Each page had basic info, medical background, and a statement from the donor. No photos were available, but they offered to help match you with someone if you wanted. There were not a lot of donors to choose from, but I found one who matched my criteria. I had decided that since my child would only know one parent, it was probably best if they looked similar to me, so I chose a Caucasian donor, Northern European descent, with brown hair and green eyes. To be honest, if I started earlier, I would have probably done the rainbow brood thing like Brad and Angelina and had a baby with every ethnicity donor. But for the first time, this first one who might be likely an only child, I went for an ethnic match. Plus, the donor was tall and had a graduate degree, no known genetic diseases in his family. He sounded perfect. I made an appointment to be inseminated during my next cycle in a couple of weeks. As I waited, taking my temperature each morning and checking my cervical mucus to see if it was the consistency of egg whites, which I learned was a sure sign of ovulation and something I now cannot not think of every time I make a scrambled egg. I figured, why not look at another sperm bank's available donors? I mean, I'm a savvy shopper. I would never buy the first car I saw, so it only made sense to look around a little more. So I went online to a sperm bank on the opposite side of the country and at the opposite end of the marketing and technology spectrum. They had a slick website. Although they had no identity release program, you could peruse their donor database online from the comfort of your living room, and intriguingly, all of their donors had photos accessible for a mere $100 fee. I searched their site based on my criteria and found a profile that sounded similar to my donor in Berkeley. PhD, brown hair, green eyes, German-Irish descent. So I clicked to see his photo. Okay, So you know how those internet pranks where you're watching some innocuous video or filling out a survey and suddenly a really horrifying photo pops up on the screen to scare you? That was the reaction I had to seeing this guy. He was freakish looking. His hairline came down so low on his forehead that it nearly corresponded with his unibrow. His teeth were like tiny yellow chiclets. Now, please let me hasten to add that if you saw a lineup of my ex-lovers, you would have to agree that I'm not a look snob, and I'm sure this guy was a very nice human or human-esque being. But when every cell in your body screams, "Yikes, run away!" I believe that's nature's way of preventing bad DNA from commingling. Proper evolution of the species really depends on all of us heeding those brainstem level warnings. I knew immediately that I could not get pregnant with a donor unless I had a photo of what he looked like. Honestly, how could I trust these Berkeley lesbians to judge primal attraction to the male species? I canceled that appointment, wasted another month of fertility while I looked for a donor who fit all my basic criteria and had a photo that passed my new "would I fuck him" test. After a few weeks of looking, I finally found XY-Tex donor number 9268, and it turned out that he did not provide any adult photos, but there was a childhood photo of him at about 3 or 4 years old, dressed in a little sailor suit, sitting in a preschool desk, cute as can be. I figured this was enough. I could tell he had no extreme features. If my child turned out looking something like this, that would be great. I reserved about 10 vials of his sperm, knowing that at my age it might well take several times if I was lucky enough to get pregnant at all. And a couple of weeks later, once shipping and storage had been sorted out, I was sitting in a paper gown in an infertility clinic in Palo Alto with a doctor writing "lack of sperm exposure" on my chart as my official infertility diagnosis. He proceeded to inseminate me with the first vial of donor number 9268. And that's all it took. I got pregnant on the first try. Sure enough, lack of sperm exposure was indeed my only fertility problem. 9 months later, I gave birth to a large, healthy baby boy. I was elated. One of the first things I did after recovering from the C-section was to begin thinking about the possibility of a sibling at some point. It would be great for my son to have a full genetic sibling using the same donor. Would those remaining 9 vials be enough? Maybe not. I was getting old. Multiple IVF cycles might be required. So I quickly went into the XY-Tex website and bought out all the entire remaining supply of number 9268. As it turned out, there weren't that many left. Just another 8 vials because he had already been retired as a donor, having produced the maximum number of offspring they allow. Over the next few weeks, as I got into the routine of motherhood, I thought about the sperm donor a lot. It occurred to me that I should try to find any additional information about him that I could in case my baby had questions later. I joined a website called the Donor Sibling Registry, where I was able to search for my sperm donor and his sperm bank ID number and connect with other women who had children using his sperm. I think that's for the better good of the children. Hashtag kissing your sister. Okay. I connected with about 6 different women who had number 9268 offspring. We exchanged contact information and photos of the kids and agreed to stay in touch over the years so that in the future our children could communicate if they decided they wanted to know each other. One of the women contacted the group a few months later asking if anyone had extra vials of 9268 because she and her partner were thinking about trying for another baby, and apparently someone had recently bought out all of 9268's supply. I felt a little guilty and was contemplating fessing up about how I'd cornered the market, when the next day she emailed with some exciting news. The sperm bank had allowed number 9268 to come back to make additional donations, but only to produce siblings of existing offspring since he had already been so prolific. I was relieved about this development. I could keep all the sperm I had without any guilt, and yet the families who already had number 9268 kids could have a genetic sibling if they wanted. Perfect. But then, a few weeks later, she popped up again with even more good news. She let us all know that when number 9268 had returned, he updated his profile, and now it contained an adult picture! Shit. I sat there nursing my wonderful 3-month-old, wondering if I could look at the picture. What if I'm repulsed? Could it change how I feel about this beautiful child? Would I watch him grow up with a sense of apprehension instead of pure joy? Of course I knew the right thing to do. Just put it out of my mind, never think of it again. There was no need to see any more photos. I had the most wonderful child in the world. What did I care what his biological father looked like? Yeah, right. That moment of zen-like self-control lasted about 3 minutes before I ran to my computer and frantically typed in my credit card number to get the photo access. There it was, his updated profile. And sure enough, it showed 2 pictures were available. I clicked on the first one. It was a childhood photo I already had. I held my breath and clicked on the second one. I winced while the file opened. The internet and my universe slowed down. Slowly, and with great apprehension, I opened my eyes, and there he was. My reaction was strong and visceral and immediate. Yeah, I'd fuck him. And really, I never worried about that ever again, because the next day my son rolled over for the first time by himself, and I had to start worrying about him falling off of things. And then it seemed just a few days after that he was supposed to start preschool, and I worried about whether he would be potty trained in time. And then a week later, he was in the 3rd grade learning multiplication tables, but could never nail 6 times 8. Then just a few months went by, and he had somehow started middle school. And last week, he made out with a girl on his class trip to Washington, D.C. So I began to worry about whether I'm going to become a grandmother way too early. So you see, there are just so many more things to worry about that I've never again had to worry about or even thought much about his sperm donor. But if number 9268 is hearing this, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for making my life complete. This is really sweet. She wants to have children as much as I don't. Okay, sorry. Your child, our child, is amazing and a great addition to this world. And last of all, thank you for looking fuckable.